All right, and there is my green light to go. So happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to episode 39 of Change School TV, our weekly dose of inspiration for your Monday mojo and mindset reset for the week ahead. Now, tonight we have a very special guest, Lindsey Caplan, on the show as part of our Humans of Change series. Lindsey designs, facilitates, and manages meaningful and impactful learning experiences, leadership and talent development, and change programs at the individual, group, and organizational level. She's a big picture thinker who thrives on empowering and educating organizations and their people, equipping them with new tools, strategies, or skills to spur growth. Equal parts art and science, she leverages her background in screenwriting to build experiential programs with empathy and creativity, and utilizes a master's degree in organizational psychology to create research and database solutions that stick. Most of all, she's fueled by a strong desire to teach and help others succeed. She has over 9 years as an improviser and improv coach. Her writings on learning and organizational development can be found on her website, which I'll share in a moment. And she's currently working on a book about the intersection of learning, leadership, and the arts. Lindsey, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello. I know some folks will probably just be jumping on and joining us live over the next few minutes. So I will ramble a little bit just to get everybody on and settled, and then we can dive right into some of the questions I have. Now, we were just chatting earlier about this, but it is so great to reconnect after so many years. I think it was Mark Guay who was on the show last week, who first introduced us in 2014, I think it was.
Yes, yeah.
So it's pretty crazy how much time flies. But even then, I think what was so awesome was how we found quite a few synergies, right, in the work that both of us are doing and both our organizations are doing. And I think we all kind of share this passion and drive to help both people and companies to navigate change and make positive transformation happen.
Absolutely. Yes. Kindred spirits in that way, for sure.
Exactly. And I'm super excited for tonight as well. Not just for our viewers to hear all the amazing stuff you've been doing, but also so I get a little catch up on all that you've been up to, because we haven't had that chance to reconnect yet. And I actually never knew that you had a background as in screenwriting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a very big part of my life. Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm super excited to hear how all the dots connect, because I think when we connected in 2014, that may or may not have come up, but it probably wasn't the focus of what we were talking about. So I read that recently. I was like, oh my God, I got to hear this story.
Can do.
Awesome. So, all right. I think, we're about 5 minutes in, and hopefully folks are joining us live or just jumping on. And the replay will be available. If you're just jumping online, the replay will be available in a couple of days, as always. So no worries if you've missed the first few minutes. And hopefully you can stick around for the next 30 to 40 minutes. Okay, Lindsey, shall we dive into some questions and get your story out there?
Yes, let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, so I generally like to just start from exactly where we are today. So maybe we could kick off by having you to tell everyone a bit about the work that you're currently doing and what you're currently working on.
Sure. Yeah. So I currently work in the field of learning and development at a technology company based in San Francisco called Credit Karma. And what learning and development basically means is helping a group of people or individuals get from A to B. So sometimes it's a training class, sometimes it's coaching, sometimes it's some other sort of intervention or facilitation. But basically, I manage change inside an organization using learning as one of the primary tools.
Awesome. And I mean, I know Well, I don't know, actually. We're in very different markets, but I know it's not always that easy to help organizations to change and to sort of navigate a very uncertain and dynamic environment. So this is kind of a left fielder, but just because you framed it, what's your favorite thing about the work that you do?
My favorite thing about the work that I do is it's very creative. So a lot of times there isn't one clear solution, and it's fun to sort of script in a way how to get or how to move, how to enable change in different ways. So sometimes that means scripting a 2-hour workshop and trying to figure out, what does that look like? What experience do a group of people have to go through to get from A to B? And so in that way, it's very creative. The second piece that I enjoy is how rewarding it is. So we'll talk about this, but what was missing from my previous work was the impact, seeing the people that I was helping. And in this role and in this work, a lot of times you're face to face with those people, and being able to see that light bulb moment or have a part in that positive change is incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that you understand and relate to that as well.
Yes, so. I definitely resonate with that very much. And I also find it super interesting. I mean, we're all a product of our experiences, and that kind of shapes how we see the world. And I love that you describe what I usually call boringly like learning design. Scripting, I love that because I definitely see the parallel, and naturally with your background, that's also how you kind of see it. So I love that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So did you always know, I think this is something I get asked a lot, and I'm always curious, and I understand why, because it's something I always want to ask people as well, especially in this line of work. I mean, when did you sort of decide that this was the kind of work you wanted to do, or did you fall into it? How did that kind of come about?
A little bit of luck and a little bit of the right timing and the right opportunity, which is sort of how it happens, being open to the experience. I didn't always know this is what I wanted to do. I was pretty sure I was dead set on something else. But I remember the moment that I figured out this is what I wanted to do, the exact moment. I had a mentor and boss who I think had put the pieces together for me quicker than I had for myself. And he went to a workshop where the facilitators used improv and storytelling to sort of enable, for lack of a better word, leadership development in a group of people at an organization I worked for. He came back from the workshop. He had the booklet from the class in his hand, and he put it on my desk, and he said, well, I found what you're going to do with the rest of your life.
Just like that.
And I was like, yes. I looked at it, and I think the thing I had been looking for really came into clearer focus in that moment and in that year, and I really never looked back after that.
How interesting. And I mean, could you maybe take us into that piece a little bit more? Like what aspects or what specifically do you think he saw or was alluding to when he just with such confidence said to you, this is it?
Yeah. Well, he knew about my background in screenwriting and how I really wanted to find something creative. And he also knew I had left that field because it was a little bit lonely to be writing all day. The irony of where I am now is kind of funny, but I think I was also working in the education department at the time. So I was working in learning and development, but I wasn't really seeing how I fit into it because it was mostly a technical department. And I had also started taking improv classes at that time because of his encouragement. And I was wondering how to use all these things together in a way that would impact people and help people. But this isn't a career path that people know about in school or in university. It's not something where, at least I didn't know about it. So it's sort of something that people fall into or discover a lot of times by luck or by accident. And I think he just happened to see where I was getting energy and this was a good blend of all those skills and the impact I wanted to have. So yeah, I have him to thank. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think, it's something we always say to a lot of our students at the Change School as well. It's so invaluable to have a mentor. And even if you can't have like a formal mentor, even just to have nowadays, I think thankfully we have more access to different practitioners, coaches, guides, advisors, or just our peers. But I think, a lot of times we maybe undermine the importance of having that external person who a lot of times can see more in you than you necessarily recognize in yourself, right?
Yeah.
And can help to make those types of recommendations. So what was your first response when he kind of said that? Were you immediately like, yes? Or was it like, I don't know if that's, how did you feel?
I think I knew in my bones that was right. I had been searching for the past year for exactly what that looked like. I had applied to get my MBA. I thought this was the thing I was meant to do. It really wasn't. He's also the one that told me to take an improv class, and I said no to him for a long time before I actually said yes. So I think I had known him for about 5 or 6 years at that point, my mentor, my old boss. So I knew I had to pay attention to this one. And so you said something interesting, the importance of having a mentor, but I also think being open to the advice and coaching that you receive is equally important. You can have all the mentors in the world, but if you're not listening to them or open to what they say, it's not as useful. So
no, that's a great point. Yeah.
So, the idea of a goal or a dream is very large and broad and abstract to people. But when someone comes in and says, well, this is the next step, or this is the path, and shows you that path, it becomes a lot easier to unlock, how to make that happen.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And I think also, I think there was probably at some point a bit of discomfort, right? And I think a lot of it too is being able to, it's actually just something I was speaking to someone else about today, is, learning how to sit with that discomfort, to be in that discomfort, and then try new things, right? Even if initially it seems like totally left field.
Tons of discomfort. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that once he said that everything was easy. It actually meant that he showed me the path, and it was going to require a good amount of sacrifice. So I quit my job a few months after that and went out on my own and started blogging every day and reading everything I could. And then I moved to New York and went to grad school, and it unlocked a lot, but it didn't mean that it was all sunshine and rainbows. So you got to be willing to put in the work and to sit in that discomfort, but holding on to why you're doing it makes it a lot easier as well. So
yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really important one, the why that we always talk about. Now, just to backtrack a bit, because I know, so I know the screenwriting in your current work, right, has allowed you to really, I guess, harness and leverage the creative side of what you have to do. But then I know that there's also a less creative side to it. And then your background as well in psychology and, like you said, the MBA. So there's also the science or more practical side of things. So I'm just wondering if at any point, did you feel torn between the two? Did you feel like you were having to give up one for the other, or that were you struggling to kind of merge them and marry them?
Yes, there definitely have been moments when that's been the case. I think it took me maybe 10 years to understand how that background fit together into one narrative. But I remember specifically, I worked for a consulting firm for a little while, and I felt, I think wrongly felt this way, but at the time I was a little naive, that I had to put that creative side of me aside.
Right.
And when I felt that way, I had definitely an identity crisis. I would call friends and say, but I'm an artist, and artist part's important to me. Why am I wearing these clothes? And what am I doing working on these PowerPoint decks all day? And so I sort of felt I had to shove that part of me down. But a lot of what you realize is that a lot of people view their work as art. Mm-hmm. And even if I didn't see it that way, they probably did. And so developing a little bit of empathy for art doesn't always look the way we think it does. These like zany people throwing paint against the walls, that's not, everyone's trying to do their art. Work is very personal to a lot of people, and it's what they care about. So I think I felt like I had to hide that, but I I think if you find the right place and you have the right people around you, you don't necessarily have to. It's all in sort of how you talk about it and how you message it and how you share it. And the key is understand what they're going to benefit from and not just you doing what it is you want to do, because you're an artist. So,
Yeah.
but why don't they understand me? It's not about me. So.
No, that's actually, I love that point, because I think sometimes something we hear a lot from people, and I think it's all valid, right? But it's just more food for thought, right? I think a lot of times you get the whole gamut. There's some people who are just really unhappy in their roles and really can't seem to resonate or make a connection with the work that they're doing. And I've definitely experienced that firsthand. So I totally get it. But I guess another side of that coin too, and it's probably a bit kind of what you're saying as well, is that it's also about, I guess even for me, I've shifted a bit on how I look at creativity and how, in a lot of ways, I probably went through a similar crisis where I was like, but I'm a creative, I'm an artist, and I should be doing all these things. But then I started to realize so much of it is our own mindset and perspective and attitude as well, I think the serving piece, you're absolutely right. The impact you're making is one, but it's also like, how can you see your own uniqueness, your own point of view, your style, the way you approach things as an art in and of itself, right? And I think that for me, that slight but very powerful shift started to make me see almost, okay, not every, like accounting is still accounting and that's just it. But, I think a lot of the other stuff, whether it's PowerPoint decks, even drafting a proposal, trying to convince someone to make a certain decision, I think all of these things or requirements also take an art, right? And a science. So I think it's kind of looking at the two maybe a bit differently. Right?
Absolutely. And to sort of piggyback on that a little bit, one realization I had maybe about 4 or 5 years ago was, if I hold on too tightly to I'm the creative one and I'm creative, and two things can happen. One is that doesn't leave room for other people to feel that way, because then everyone's assuming that I'm that person and they'll give me that work, and I don't allow other people to express that part of them or find it. And then you also kind of get pigeonholed.
Yes.
Well, Lindsey will do the creative work. Give it to her. She'll come up with something. And as much as my ego enjoys that, it is a lot of pressure.
Totally.
So it's a balance between holding so tightly to who you think you are and allowing, to kind of be a tree and let it move a little bit and sort
with the wind. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think that is such a powerful point. And I've not actually thought about that, but you are absolutely right. And I think even with a lot of the creatives that we've worked with, I mean, you're more, more stereotype creatives, right? So people who are like in graphic design, really in using like visual design as a big part of their work. I think we found that they tend to struggle the most with, okay, but this is who I am. Where else could I go? So I think that point you've made is really relevant and a good one for a lot of folks. Hopefully, if a lot of creatives are watching tonight, I hope you hold on to that, but I'll add it in the comments again, because I think that's really powerful. Awesome. So maybe you could tell us a time when you've sort of, because it sounds like obviously there's been ups and downs of the journey, and I'm sure the next 30-40 minutes won't even do your story enough justice, but hopefully we can extract some of these really key and pivotal moments. When along your journey would you say has been a really difficult moment, or a crossroads even, where you kind of felt like you had to make a big decision that would set you on one path versus another? And how did you choose?
There's been a lot of those as I stare out the window and remind myself of all of those. There's even a big one I took a few months ago. But I think quite a big one was, I studied film in undergrad and in university, and I was dead set on moving to Los Angeles and being a screenwriter. I was really certain that I was going to work in television comedy for the rest of my life, and I was going to pursue that goal. And I moved to Los Angeles right after school. And I wouldn't even let my parents throw me a graduation party. I was so set on getting there as soon as I could. So I went to Los Angeles, and about 15, 16 months into my time there, I realized I was really miserable and unsure that this was the thing I was meant to do. And that is a scary place to be as a 22-year-old, specifically because I had planned my whole life around this one singular dream and put all of my energy into that. But I realized kind of slowly that the dream had maybe changed. And so I made the decision to quit my job, pack up my U-Haul, and move back to San Francisco. And it was very scary because I didn't know what I was going to do if not this one thing. Yeah. I had spent all this money on this degree. I had told everyone this is what I was going to do. And I was worried that it seemed like I was a failure to sort of move back in with my parents and give up this dream. But that stands out as a very key decision that I made, and one that I wasn't sure if I would regret. I don't. But for a while, it felt very high stakes.
Yeah, I'm sure. And do you mind if I ask, like, was there, it probably wasn't one thing. I'm guessing there was probably a buildup of things, but can you, in hindsight, think of one particular trigger or something that, because you said that your dream changed. And I think that's, especially like you said, at 22, that's a big freaking deal. Like, I mean, if I was 22 and I'd probably be freaking out, right? So one is, I guess, what kind of triggered that? And then two was like, how did you kind of feel in that moment? How did you manage to actually make that move, right? And shift across and move in with your parents in the end,
Yeah, it was like 13 years ago at this point, so I'm trying to go all the way back in time. But I remember, I had moved out to Los Angeles with a lot of friends from school and people who were in pursuit of a similar dream. And I just remember seeing people around me who were working harder at it than me and wanted it more than me. I wasn't really writing. I wasn't really working on what I said I was going to work on. And I kind of saw 10 years into my future of something I didn't think I wanted. I didn't know if I wanted to make that commitment. And I also realized how impatient I was at 22. Right. Had I been there now, I would have maybe made a different decision. But I think the combination of impatience and being unsure if I really wanted to work towards this one thing, now that I saw how it really worked, like I saw how the sausage was made, and I was like, I don't know if I want to work in that factory. So though there wasn't really one moment. I did buy a book called What Should I Do With My Life? And I do remember sitting by the pool reading that book. And I was like, okay, this is not a good sign. I think what a nice Los Angeles pool. People would kill to have this opportunity and live this dream, but I don't think it belonged to me anymore.
Right. Amazing. I mean, it's interesting because, maybe you didn't feel it at the time, but, to hear you recall that story now, it actually sounds like a very adult and wise choice to make, even though it probably felt like your whole life was going to crumble at that moment, right? And I think something you said that is really interesting and something I believe as well, and we say this a lot to people, it's like, because, we help a lot of people doing goal setting and setting intentions and, trying to build rituals and get shit done by being more productive. But something we also say in the same light is, if you're finding that you're not getting something done over and over again, if you're writing these goals that seem to look good on paper, or maybe, at least on that top surface seem to be like, yes, that's what I want, but then it's not happening, then a lot of times tends to be your subconscious or that little wisdom nugget in your brain going, hi, can you please rethink this? Or maybe this isn't quite what you're really wanting as much as you think, So right. I think it's really interesting you said that, and I think it's just one example of when, we have these signs that a lot of times we don't listen to, right? We may or may not listen to, right?
Yes. Absolutely. When you're trying to push against something that's coming at you, it's much harder than when you're, back to the tree analogy, sort of going with where the wind takes you. Not that that means you're not planning or in control, but you're paying attention to what's happening and sort of going with where things are taking you and where the energy is taking you. So I've learned that lesson over and over again.
Yeah. And I think, interestingly, I think to use your screenwriter speak, right, in a sense, you've probably become a bit of a expert improviser in life and work, right? I mean, that's kind of it. And I think a lot of times people struggle with this idea. They're like, so are you saying to plan or not plan, right? Like, let go, have intent, don't plan. Like, I'm confused, right?
Yeah.
But I like, and to use your words, because I saw this in one of the blog posts, this whole idea of improv, right? And I guess the beauty of improv is like you have a script, but you have an idea, a concept, right? But a lot of it is just depending on how things happen and being able to flow with it, right? So,
yeah. Well, can I clarify a little bit around that?
Please.
So I think this might be helpful. So I, as a screenwriter, was trying to script my life. So that was the mistake I was making. I was like, I'm going to go to this school and then I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And everything was going according to that script. Everything I scripted up until that point, that reading that book had happened.
Yeah.
And then I realized the script that I had written was not a happy ending necessarily.
Yeah.
And so you really can't script happiness or script your career. You can, but maybe that's not the story you're meant to be in. And so when I started taking improv classes, I realized slowly over time the benefit of what we call an improv accepting an offer. So an offer is something that someone says or does or a suggestion. And in improv, you have to accept every offer that comes your way. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with it. Doesn't mean that I have to be like, I love this. But you have to find a way to move forward with it. The opposite of that is blocking the offer, saying no, or what we typically say in business is like no, but, or no. And that's a no-no in improv. Then you're not making everyone else on that stage look good. You're not supporting them. So when you're improvising solo, you have to pay attention to the offers that you're receiving and giving and finding ways to sort of still on your own, not block yourself, which can be very hard to do. So sometimes that comes out because of fear. But it's allowed me to understand how to be more open to those experiences. I'm not perfect at it, right? I don't want to say, I'm amazing, I figured it all out. But it changes your mindset into, I can't do the 10 steps. I have to be open to step 8 going this way. So it doesn't mean don't plan. It just means plans don't always come to fruition. You have to be open to what else might happen. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love this idea of always accepting what's offered. I think that's a really beautiful way to think about it. And just as you were talking, I was like, wow, that must be so powerful inside organizations, whether you're doing, exercises or programs to kind of look at it that way, as always accepting. And it reminds me of a workshop we recently did where, yes, we had everyone do the first round where it's sort of, okay, answer every idea with yes, but. Mm-hmm. And then we did a second round where it was now answer with yes, and. Right? And just seeing how differently that whole experience of brainstorming and imagining possibilities became, right? With that slight shift.
It's much more generative and much more generous to yourself and people around you. It doesn't mean that you have to say yes to every opportunity that comes your way. It doesn't mean that every job offer or every request is a yes. You're not being a yes man or yes woman, but you are finding something in that offer that you can move forward with. So you might say no to a job offer, but it forces you to think about it a bit more clearly and say, what's the piece in here I might stick with or pay attention to or keep for later? Just a more intentional way of living.
Yes, exactly. And it weaves some positivity into the whole internal dialogue as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. Well, so I I guess I kind of identify in some level as, a change worker, as I imagine you would as well. And so what do you see? I think you mentioned it just now. I mean, fear definitely tends to be something that percolates and kind of, ends up standing in our way from moving forward or from making some positive shifts. And a lot of times we're not so aware of it. What are some other big barriers or challenges that you've seen in working with clients or just projects that you've had, whether on an individual level or sort of organizational and systemic level? What do you think is one of the biggest resistances to change?
I think there's a few. I'm trying not to get all theoretical here, but I think but a few things. One is a sense of urgency. Right. If people don't feel, for lack of a better word, like a burning platform or a reason to change, they're probably going to stay in their comfort zone because that's a very safe place to be. And if you're trying to help people move out of a situation that they're in, there's a lot of comfort to where they currently are. So you have to understand what that is and how to unpack that. So that's one. Yeah. Two is sometimes people don't have a sense of the future. So what is the path towards that change? Like my boss did for me. Well, here's the next step. And that helps it be more concrete to people. One of the lessons I've learned as a kind of a gray thinker is that for the black and white thinkers, the engineers or the technical minded folks, they need the formula. They need the 6 steps, even if that's not how change works. They need the roadmap. So that's another. And then we mentioned fear. Another one is sort of the social aspect of it. So who's around you? What cues are they giving you? A group is a very powerful focal point for change. And if you can sort of give people the social proof or sort of rig the environment to understand how they, as a collective, can move in a different direction, it's a little bit easier. So unlocking where they currently are, helping them move one step forward, showing them what that future state looks like. And lastly, it always has to be described in their words or how it will benefit them. So oftentimes we push change on people because we, as a leader or as the person in charge, think, well, they got to do what I say. But I always have to think about why would they do it? What's the personal reason? And make them the hero in that regard. So in that way, I don't mean to frame it as complicated, but it can be. I don't think we give it enough attention and thought, honestly, when we think about how to manage change. I think we think we can put it in a slide deck and people will change, but not really. It doesn't really work that way.
No, definitely not. And I think, maybe, I don't know if you find this too, but I think then when you even look at an individual level, right, where you're even irrespective or separate from the organization, it can almost become even harder, right? Because there's no slide decks involved there, and a lot of us don't even think or know sometimes of the tools that we can utilize to help us, like you said, right, imagine the future or map it out or visualize what it could look like. And then if we are fortunate enough to do that, it's then like, okay, great, now what? Right? Like, how do I actually start?
So on an individual level, if I'm helping someone one-on-one, the equivalent of a PowerPoint deck is someone talking at somebody else and telling them what they think that they should do. And the power of a simple question or a set of questions, like you're doing now, asking someone something and just shutting up, a good open-ended question and give them the space to think and generate ideas and not judge it, helps people, because we like to do what we come up with, what our ideas are. We don't change because someone says so. We change because we think we should. So those questions help people unlock it. The difference is they have to leave that conversation with a step forward of what they're going to do next. Because if it's just like, let me ask you a bunch of questions, that might be just therapy. Let me go back into your history and be like, okay, why did you do this and this? to help someone move forward and change, it's like, okay, so what one thing are you going to do differently based on our conversation? Or what's the next step? Or what are you going to do tomorrow? And that can be powerful for people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, maybe you could share, I think, and I agree with you. I always sometimes have to catch myself too. I'm like, I don't want to talk too much technical and theory, even though that's sometimes how my brain thinks because I'm always trying to design content. But I think what always helps is to allow people to also see what it looks like in the real world, right? So just based on everything you shared, I mean, could you maybe give an example of how you've applied some of that through in your own journey, or what insights or lessons you took away from trying to implement those very steps, right? That reflecting and then taking action. And
yeah, I kind of am tempted to use myself as an example, but I don't know if that's beneficial to you. So should I do that?
No, whichever, whatever you think is.
Trying to think of an example. I'm trying to improvise here, but I think anytime someone is trying to make a big decision in their life, and I'll sort of speak kind of like I'm talking about myself because I am, people know what to do, and their head might agree, but their heart might not, or vice versa. There's a great book on change called Switch by the Heath brothers. So that's a plug for a book. And it talks about the three ingredients for change. So one is the head, so the rational mind. Two is the heart, obviously, the emotional center. And then third is the elephant. The elephant basically means scripting the path. So what is that going to look like? And I think in the case of myself, I often have one of the ingredients, but not all three. And it's not until you have all three that you're really ready to sort of let go of something in order to move forward. So, I'm not speaking very specifically here, but people who are wrestling with a decision, the empathetic thing to do is to really help them understand where they're currently at, which one of the three are they missing, and not to push them into like, well, you know the thing you should be doing, because they do know, but they're still holding on to something.
Yeah.
Or they don't have a sense of the path. So listen carefully to where that person is and how you can help add that missing ingredient. In my case, I often make changes in very small stages, or take risks in very small stages and small steps. So that's okay too. It doesn't have to be this big, quit your job and move across the world. That's not normally how it works. And when you know someone who's going through that, reward those small steps. So the mistake we make is not giving people positive encouragement for the thing that they are doing, and sort of instead holding them accountable, or sort of, cracking the whip to say you should do something.
Yeah.
There's a little kindness and empathy and reward of saying, you did that thing, you can do it again. I'm proud of you.
Absolutely.
So it's not specific, but.
No, I think that's great. That's super helpful. And I mean, I think what I would just maybe add on there is, I like this head, heart, and the elephant. So, I mean, do you have any practices of your own, or anything, I don't know, some weird exercise or mantra or something that you do for yourself if you're noticing that one of those three pieces is missing, or not totally aligned? Just how do you kind of check in with yourself on that?
Yeah. So for me, fear is a big driver still in this day and age. Right. And so for me, it's more the head. Right. I always lead with my heart, and I can always figure out the path. I'm pretty good at that. I don't mean to brag. I don't mean like that. But I'll find a way to make something I want happen. But what's holding me back is normally what I'm afraid of, the fear. Mm-hmm. And so, close mentors of mine know this about me, and they'll just sort of say, like, what are you afraid of? What's going on? What's the worst thing that can happen? Or, and they'll help expose that for me. And then they'll really test that hypothesis and say, how true is that? Is it really that bad? And that can be helpful for people as well. Not everyone is driven by that. But another reversal of that is to make it about sort of who you want to be or who you are, or use your values to help drive you in a specific direction. So, are you really the kind of person who does X, or you said you want to be X, or this is important to you? Then why are you? Because stories are about choices.
Yes.
And our choices are driven by our values. So exposing A, the story that we're telling ourselves, and B, the values that we have, and if this is the right story, can help sort of align people into what's missing.
Yep. No, I love that. I couldn't agree more. And I think, I think even our approach at the Change School as well is, that's why we focus so much on values, right? And sometimes that's a hard way to just like jump into as a first step. And so it's kind of coming from both angles, right? And like you said, I think some people are maybe more innately head driven, and some are maybe more innately heart driven. And so it's kind of understanding too how the individual thinks and works and processes, and then what's the best way to help them find that alignment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's a little different.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot different.
But I'm probably quite similar, because when you said head and, a lot of fear driven, I think that's definitely something I've had. And I've really been working so hard on it, especially in the past few years, to really just kind of check in. And I think what's interesting, at least in my own experience, is once you start knowing how to observe when fear is popping up, it's actually, I don't know, for me, I've learned to kind of laugh at it. I kind of get annoyed because I'm like, oh my God, again, I'm freaking out over something that's not true. But then I've also just kind of learned to laugh at it a bit, because I'm like,
that's good. Teach me your talent.
Well,
I just wallow in
do.
it. I'm just like, I wallow in it, and I don't, and then I'm in inaction for a long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's definitely, there's a spectrum, right? But I guess what I'm trying to do, right, is to reduce the wallowing time and the inactive time, right, slowly. I still have to give it to myself, because it's part of the process, right? But if I can just shorten that period a little bit, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, and that's where small experiments can help. It doesn't have to be this big thing.
Yeah. Totally. And so, I mean, that was very much part of your journey, right? As you were kind of moving, like I know you were dabbling with different things. Could you maybe share a bit about that and how that helped?
You mean along the career path that I've taken, or?
Yeah. Sorry. So you moved, so let's just backtrack for a minute. So you did move, you moved in with your parents for a bit, right? And then you had to get back on your feet, and then maybe a bit of what happened then.
Yeah. So I randomly found a job posting to work at DreamWorks Animation, which is an animation company. Yeah. And they happen to have an office in San Francisco. So I was like, oh, perfect. Entertainment world. I'll be around creative people. Amazing. I think, again, my impatience and my sense of like, this is the thing I'm meant to do, pushing so hard against the thing, caused me to knock around.
Uh-oh. Whoops. Lindsey, I think I lost you for a minute. Hang on, how do I get you back? Okay.
All right.
Oh, it's still loading. Okay, it's going to take a couple seconds, but just in case there's a lag, as there always is, sorry guys if you were joining us live. Apologies if we just got cut off for a minute, but very apt for tonight's episode where we're talking all about improvising.
Yeah, that was planned.
Rolling with the punches. Exactly. It was totally part of the script.
Yes.
So sorry, Lindsey, I cut you off halfway. So let's just backtrack and pick up where we left off. You were just sharing about sort of what happened. You got an interview with DreamWorks, which is amazing. And then what?
And then I didn't realize the wonderful opportunity I had. I wasn't really sure what I wanted. And so for several years, I went in search of a new dream. So I think this is kind of a good lesson for people out there. Learn from my mistakes. I was looking for this singular dream. And in pursuing it, I tried a bunch of different things to sort of find the thing. And I tried marketing, and I tried working in sports, and I tried, this was during the recession, so I tried a lot of things. But then I realized that pursuing the dream was actually not the right approach, and that I was learning how to find a purpose instead. Because once you find what you're meant to do in a way, your purpose, the dream can A, look different, and actually be several different things. So, and that's how I landed back at DreamWorks, actually, in the education department. And from there, I've sort of snowballed into different opportunities that I feel like are fully within what I'm meant to be doing. The lesson here is, and I had a professor in grad school who put this very well, when we are growing up, we're taught the Disney movie formula, which is to pursue this kind of singular dream, to go after your dream, find your passion, find the thing. But instead, we should look at it like Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music, which is to climb every mountain until you find your dream. So the idea there is to try a bunch of things and to be open to it, as opposed to pursue the singular thing that you think you're meant to be doing. So that's the lesson I learned. It took me a long time to learn that, but
that is very powerful. I love that your professor put it that way. I've actually never heard it that way. And my next question, just based on what you said, was going to be, how would you distinguish or describe, like, what's a dream and what's a purpose? And actually, I love that. It makes total sense. So yeah, maybe as you know, that was sort of the title that we had for tonight, because I thought that, you know, it's so powerful, and one that I think a lot of people would be curious to hear more about, is like, you know, yeah, when does the dream end and the purpose start? And, you know, and am I to be defining, do I need to predefine my purpose before I do something? Am I letting go of my dreams? So I think there's so many ideas and notions around these words, and then what we're supposed to be doing or not supposed to be doing with them. Yeah.
So many rules,
yeah,
which really don't exist. You know, this is my opinion, so take that for what it is. I think that they can both fuel each other. So an easy way for me to think about it is, dreams are what, and a purpose is why. And so dreams can inform a purpose, or a purpose can inform a dream. Dreams change. Right? So you can have many different dreams, but a purpose is very persistent, and it'll keep sort of knocking at your door until you open it. And so once you figure out why you're doing what you're doing, you may have many different dreams that come one after the other that help fulfill your purpose. If we focus too much on one dream, when we achieve it, there's this huge letdown of like, now what?
Yeah, that was it?
That was it? Well, that's boring.
Yeah.
And instead, you know, purpose is always unfolding. And I'm understanding this now, you know, 15 years or so into my career, of what happens when purpose is so strong that the dreams change and evolve and become better. So
yeah.
Does that help?
No, absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm just fascinated that you've put it in such simple but totally sensible and understandable words, because I think that's really, you've helped to demystify, I think, in a lot of ways. And I do feel, at least, you know, with the people we've worked with, I do feel that that's something a lot of people struggle with, you know, is really like understanding the two. And more importantly, it's not, to your point, right? It's not about rules and definitions, because those are all kind of made up by somebody, but how do I understand it for myself? How do I carve it, define it, and clarify it for myself? So I think what you said is awesome.
I think it also helps you not compare yourself to other people as much.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think every culture, every market has different dynamics around that. I think something I always joke about, just having been in Singapore for a very long time, I'm sure most people watching would agree, we have in many ways, a very deeply ingrained competitive nature. And if it's not competitive, it's very comparative, right? And I think that adds a lot of pressure, especially when we think about our careers, and in today's career landscape, it's just not so clear cut anymore, right? Very few of us are on this linear path, but it becomes really challenging when, we're, as a society, maybe more used to seeing that. And then when you're not on that, you're kind of like, oh my God, should I have chosen a degree and just stuck with it? Should I have just stuck out that shitty job just because I'd be more financially secure? And should I have just forgotten about the dream because that's for when I'm 60? These types of things, right?
Totally. That's the fear creeping in of, and purpose is never linear.
Exactly.
Dreams are actually never linear.
Exactly.
Linear as well. But we think it's a progression that just
Straight
goes,
path.
no, it doesn't work that way.
If only, right? But then it wouldn't be so fun or interesting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It can be fun. It can also be stressful, but.
Oh, for sure. But that's just part of the package.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to laugh about it. Yeah.
What else are you going to do?
I have no idea. You're right.
Yeah. Oh, awesome, Lindsey. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. I mean, it's so nice to have a fresh perspective, and also someone, I think there's two sides. On the one hand, I think we come from a similar place just with the nature of the work that we do, but also, your background and your personal experience also sprinkles so much more nuggets of different and unique perspective, which I really, really appreciate. So before I wrap up, I guess, is there anything that you'd like to add? And could I maybe ask you to share a little bit more, reveal a little bit more about the book that I know you're working on?
Yes. So purpose is persistent, dreams change. I am a living example of this, and 13 years after leaving Los Angeles, because I didn't want to be a writer anymore, I'm now writing a book. So it's interesting how things kind of come full circle.
Full circle, yeah.
And so I'm working on a book about how to use in-person gatherings, for lack of a better word, to create positive change in individuals and groups and organizations.
Awesome.
And there's groups of people that are really good at that, of marrying the moment to the material. And one is leaders. That's a skill that's really important. And the other is educators. So as you know, how do we get a group of people from A to B? And the third is artists. So what do comedians and musicians and live performers do that gets a group of people to feel something or be moved or changed by that experience? And so I'm putting my two worlds, or two backgrounds, together into this project, and that's what I'm working on right now. So stay tuned.
I love it. It's your purpose on paper.
It actually feels like it. Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's amazing. You're basically turning your whole story and journey into something that can be shared and used, right, and applied into this whole new world that we're trying to navigate. I love it. So I know you're working on it, no pressure, but do you have any, is there a schedule of roughly when you think it'll come out, or what's?
Oh my gosh.
Or no?
To all the, potential publishers out there watching, I'm working on my proposal right now. And so that's my immediate goal for the next couple of months. So stay tuned for that, but it's a long process.
Yeah, I am sure. It cannot be easy.
Yeah, but that's part of the fun. So
yeah,
there's a lot to learn from.
Yeah, and you've situated yourself. I'm sorry, I'm gonna make you share a bit of this because I just think it's so amazing that you've, kind of carved the time for yourself, whether it's, to work on your book or a different project, right? I think it's something that we generally don't do enough for ourselves. So could you tell everyone how much what you're doing, where you are now, and
Yes, if you can't tell by this beautiful wall behind me, I'm in New York City. So I'm here for the summer. My company very generously has allowed me the summer to work on this. It informs the work that I do for sure, but it's also this creative project that I was burning to work on. And so I'm here for the summer, working on it, researching it, talking to people, and sort of ping-ponging the idea around this giant city. So it's very special time and very exciting. Feel very lucky to have this opportunity to do it. So
brilliant. And I don't know if we mentioned at the start, but just for our viewers, if you're watching, so Lindsey's usually on the West Coast, and so she's made this, taken some time to.
That's right. Yes, I live in San Francisco full time, but to be creative for me, it meant I need to change my
environment.
My focal point, where I am, who I'm talking to. It helps to be in a new space. So
yeah, totally.
That works for me.
Probably shifted your routine a bit too, right? And just kind of your reality every day, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, well, I wish you the best of luck. I think it's amazing, the topic and everything you're weaving into this book, and I can't wait to hear about it and cheering you from the sidelines. But I'm definitely going to get my hands on one once it's all out and ready.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, well, I appreciate you coming on. And again, it's selfishly, I'm so happy to have finally caught up. I mean, not that we've caught up all 4 years, but at least now I'm up to speed on all that you're doing and have been working on. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. Final thing I just want to ask you before I wrap up is, what is the best way for people to stay connected with you?
Yes, I am not so great on the social media, but I'm on Twitter at Lindsey Caplan, LinkedIn, or my website is lindseycaplan.com.
Great. Okay. I've got your website, so I'll post that in the comments so that people can kind of find you there, and I'll share your LinkedIn as well. I recently cut myself off Twitter, but I will share yours.
That's a great idea. Yes.
I had to take one of them away, so that was the one that I decided to let go of first. Awesome. Well, thank you, Lindsey. And so for those of you watching, thanks so much for joining us live and bearing with us through our improv moments. But I hope you have taken away as much inspiration and as well as practical tips that Lindsey's shared as I have. And if you are needing any added motivation, strategies, or tips for helping you to make a pivot in your career, reposition yourself for your dream or for the purpose that you are seeing right now. If you're still working on trying to really envision that and clarify that, we do have in 2 days a free masterclass all around how to reinvent yourself for a career you love. So I'll be running that Wednesday, which is in 2 days, at the same time, live on Zoom. I'll share the link. But if you haven't already signed up or if you haven't heard about it, I really, really hope you'll join me in there. I'll be sharing more of my personal story and, as I said, some practical tips that you can really hit the ground running with this week. As you guys know, we're all about giving you little doses of inspiration that can hopefully help you make big mental shifts and take big actions over time to bring more happiness into your life and work. So Lindsey, thanks for being part of our Humans of Change community. Thanks for sharing. And I will be resharing some of the books and posts and everything that you've shared inside our comments. But thanks again, and happy Monday to you.
You too. Thanks so much. Take care.
You too.
Okay.
Bye.